Managing a Manager is today's episode, 10x harder. We tackle the claim, or we examine both sides of the belief that managing managers is actually a lot harder than just managing a team. Or is it? I mean, you might naively think, in fact, I'm sure at some point I naively thought that, hey, I'm a frontline manager and I've got 7 direct reports, and then I get promoted to manage 7 managers, and gosh, it's still just managing 7 people. It's the same skills, right? It's
right.
It can't be. How much harder can it really be? Really? And we want to look at that both sympathetically and skeptically, and tell you what Jim learned when he took that exact path, and what I've come to realize when I've worked with a lot of clients who've taken that step. So, is it in fact? Is it 10 times harder? Twice as hard? Just a tiny bit harder? Jim, give us your real world perspective, because you've been down this path.
Yeah, I think not only is it 10 times harder, but it's I would say 10 times harder with the caveat that it's a different skill set. Like it's a different set of skills. Like there's some crossover between, but it's a different playbook that's required for managing managers versus managing frontline employees.
Okay.
So, my lived experience was going from, general manager of a restaurant to a regional manager overseeing general managers of other units. And that's where I really saw the distinction. And I could look at my peers, the other regional managers that I worked with, and I could see, what I called super GMs, where they tried to be the super GM of, 8 or 10 restaurants.
So they're supposedly at that district level, but they're really just running around being a GM, only multiple times to multiple locations all at the same time.
Right. Exactly.
Well, that's one way to make it 10 times harder.
That is insane. I mean,
it's also not what we're suggesting, right? Is it?
Yeah. It's insane.
Don't do that.
And then when I took my next role, which was in the company I was in, it was area director. It'd be like a VP or a director of operations style role, where now regional managers. So I was up one more level. I was managing regional managers, and I could distinctly see that, there was 2 different types of regional managers, those that were the super GMs, and then the truly successful ones who were managers of managers.
Who took the new approach.
And I began selecting regional managers from the general manager pool based upon GMs who exhibited the traits necessary for, or had the aptitude to develop the traits necessary to manage managers.
The traits necessary. Okay, what were you looking for?
Traits is probably a misnomer there. Behavioral, like their management leadership skills. So it was really the ability to lead with some vision and delegate effectively, and not delegation by making task lists and handing them down, but true delegation of responsibility and agency and context. So I would look for a general manager whose team could operate without them.
Okay. So basically, what I'm hearing you say is you're at this very senior level, and you're looking to promote people out of the M1 level, the direct manager of a store, into this M2 level, where they really are having to manage managers and embrace this higher level of complexity and difficulty that you lived through and then you were overseeing.
Correct.
And the way to demonstrate your ability to succeed at M2 was to conduct yourself at the store level as if you were already managing managers. In other words, you were delegating so much responsibility and so much autonomy and authority to people who you had groomed to be highly responsible, that you weren't running around making sure that the fryer had enough oil, or you weren't like running off to the store yourself because you'd run out of soda, like all those little tactical, my hair's on fire kinds of things.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a book by Marshall Goldsmith, one of my favorite titles of a book. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And what I'm hearing here is that the skill set to manage managers is so qualitatively different than just managing a team, that success at managing a team is not a predictor of the success at managing managers. And if we look at the numbers, we see this bears out that like there's a 60% failure rate for people who are promoted to the director level, where we get them in the position and they just fall apart. They just can't make it work. Now, you apparently had a higher success rate because you knew what to look for and what to and how to promote and what skill sets to nurture in people so that you could promote them. I imagine.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about. Let's make the case. So I naively think, oh, I'm going to be a regional manager over 7 stores, and it's just like having 7, team leads under me. I have 7 reports, and I'm good to go. And the answer is no. You have the following new things you must do. And I suspect that number 1 is some sort of cross-team alignment, or there's some way in which managing multiple stores or multiple teams or multiple aspects of the supply chain or of the value stream starts to get very, very different than just managing one team's deliverables on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Yeah, you've got to have alignment across a broader scope, right?
And the other thing I've noticed when I've talked to folks at that M2 level is they often, especially at first, suffer some pain because they're no longer in direct touch with reality. They're not in the store seeing the sales. They're not on the floor watching how retail is happening. They're not in the call center listening in on calls. They're not with the sales force going out on sales calls. Whatever that frontline action is, they are removed. And when they do get information about what's happening at the front line, it's often delayed a day, a week. And now they're having to respond to indirect information that's delayed instead of direct information that's immediate.
Right. And then when they try to exert influence, the same thing happens in reverse.
Oh.
All actions are delayed. The sensation that when I first experienced that, I was like, oh, okay. I need to influence this group of managers in this restaurant to exert the influence that I want them to have over their restaurant, right?
I want my servers to smile, right? And if it was my store, I would know what to say and do to get my servers to smile.
It would take a week, but now it takes a month. So, my personal analogy was like, it's like I'm swimming in molasses.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're stepping into a new reality at this manager of managers level. And we're focusing on the ways it's different in a way that may be very bothersome or shocking, and it makes it harder. What are some ways in which it's easier or better, or it calls on new skills where you can actually contribute more to the organization?
Well, I think done well, you get to level up your own skills, right? Like you get to have a longer, your time span increases. You've got a longer time span that you're focused on. You're thinking further into the future.
Right.
And done well, you're able to more focus on strategy and look at the big picture. One other aspect of it that becomes easier is it becomes easier to see problems because you're not so close to all of the noise and all of the issues.
Oh, wow.
So over time, I noticed myself, I became very adept at walking into a restaurant, being able to talk to, just do a 360 through the restaurant, talk to the cooks, talk to the servers, get a sense of how things were running in the restaurant, and then be able to identify, the top 1, 2, or 3 core issues that needed to be addressed at that time.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Like I might walk into a restaurant and just, see that, like their dry storage room is a little disorganized, and that, the cooks are a little, like the cooks feel stressed for some reason, the shift isn't running well. And then I might, recognize that, that the managers aren't, they're not really setting priorities for the day effectively. So, might just see a focus of like, okay, wait a second, we're like trying to run too fast here. We need to go back to some basics and, do a good stand up, pre-shift stand up, and, get the team aligned and organized for the day before we just start rushing in and doing stuff.
Okay.
So.
And you actually, I don't know if our listeners know this about you. I was so tickled when I heard when you told me the story that for a while when you were working in the restaurant industry, you would get dropped into troubled restaurants for a couple of weeks to fix things.
Oh yeah, it was a whole like Mission Impossible opportunity that I had. It was utterly fantastic.
Say more about that.
I was in a support role. It was called like director of operations support, something like that.
Yeah.
It was really it was like the perfect job for where I was at. I had run the training department for a couple of years, and I really was ready to move into a larger corporate role. Hadn't taken a sidestep into regional management yet, but was in a role where I got to interface with all the different departments and then help them package what their programs and operationalize them.
Right.
So it was
your job to get the new behaviors down into the stores.
Right. It was like, okay, we've got this new program coming out, whatever it is. It could have been new technology, like theoretical food cost program, or it could be a new marketing or new branding concept or something like that. My job was to operationalize and execute it and make it operational for the ops teams. So super fun. Because of that, I had some autonomy in my time, and because of my previous skill set, when there was a troubled restaurant of some kind, and especially through the holidays, at the brand that I worked for was heavily holiday focused.
Oh yeah,
calendars, pies, Thanksgiving. Inevitably, there would be a restaurant that was not in good shape going into a major holiday, and so I would literally get parachuted in 2 or 3 days before, and I'd do a quick triage of what was going on, and then make a plan with the team and rally the troops, so to speak, and then execute. And it was just it was such a blast.
Imagine it was simultaneously challenging and rewarding.
Oh, incredibly rewarding, and so much fun to work with those team members. And to this day, like, it hurts when you see people working way too hard with no clarity. Like, that just hurts my heart.
Yes.
So the best thing in the world is giving the gift of that clarity and the relief, seeing the relief on their faces when you can bring that for them, and then teach them. My favorite thing to do now with that is teach them a skill to do that for themselves, so that they've got the teach the man to fish analogy.
Right. Okay. So if we look down the skill set of what you have to be good at to truly be a good manager of managers, it's aligning multiple teams, it's overseeing multiple managers and helping them grow in that management role, which is going to require you, I would claim, to have a more sophisticated theory of management, a level of understanding and knowledge and skill around how to manage people, so that you can't just do it, you can teach others to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, system design. You mentioned, corporate's got a thing and they want it to happen down at the frontline level. It's got to come down through these layers of management that have to actually take the idea and implement it. And if you aren't familiar with how to design and roll out those systems, you'll struggle, because that's your job now at M2 is, hey, we want everyone underneath you to do X, make it happen. And so it's system design. When the systems aren't working, you get to debug systems. You probably didn't do a whole lot of that as a frontline manager. You got to be thinking longer term. You might be thinking about where to open new stores. That's not a problem that a store manager has. You'll be thinking about long-term investments, changing suppliers, just a whole level of risk and planning and coordination that is not present at the lower level. What would be some countermeasures that folks could use as they're stepping up into this? And maybe some of our listeners are already at this M2, this manager of managers level, where they want to be, or they've been in it for a while and they sense, man, it's really hard. I'd like it to be easier, or it's not that hard, but maybe I need to raise the bar on myself. Maybe I should make it harder and raise my sights. What are some of maybe the countermeasures that we can offer them as techniques to overcome that distance and the delay and the the increased complexity and these layers of new responsibilities that come on you that you may not be skilled at?
Well, I think like many things, when you make it explicit,
Mm.
I think that's one of the challenges of this is, you get promoted into a role and you were a manager before and your title is still manager, or maybe it's director now.
It's senior
But-
manager, yeah, or director,
right.
or even VP.
But it still has that manager, or it still has that connotation of manager.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think explicitly realizing that it is a vastly different role.
Right.
That you no longer have direct influence, and that all of your influence needs to come, through this group of managers that you're now managing.
Okay, I'm starting to get a vibe that relationships are even more important now than they were before.
It's all about relationships. You have zero control over what's happening on the ground anymore. Zero.
And of course, if you try to break through and like bypass the manager and start to control what's happening on the front line, you just undercut the manager and destroyed their authority.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah. So I think
ouch.
recognizing that creating clarity and helping those managers prioritize what's truly important. Like, to me, that's job number one. And doing that visually and viscerally, like defining what success looks like, I think is the most powerful tool that you have in your arsenal.
Can you give us an example of a time you did that for somebody? What that looks like? Some of that here's like set priorities. I'm like, great in the abstract.
So the difference is, walking through a restaurant and, management by checklist style. I mean, this is how it's done badly in the restaurant industry all the time. And where it's managed down to the least common denominator. So there's this, checklist for the restaurant of, like where you literally walk through the entire restaurant and, do a facilities, check
clipboard in hand, and you're looking for
in hand. And generally what that actually ends up looking like is, some people just drawing lines down all the check marks, because making individual check marks is so tedious, and you're doing it 3 times a day, right? It's ridiculous. And so
you don't really look. You sort of glance.
Really look. Yeah. And you could even walk through all of that and, go through that sort of tedious, detailed, checklist as a regional manager with your general manager. You could walk through and you could do that whole thing.
Sure, you could.
And point out literally everything that's, that needs fixed, or that little corner needs cleaned, whatever. You could do that and it'd take you like an hour and a half. And maybe that's important to do once in a while, because you want to teach them like level of detail and what to look for. But I find it far more powerful to go outside the restaurant and just go, how does it feel? Like, how does this do some kind of a clearing, go get a cup of coffee first, return with fresh eyes, and go, all right, we just pulled up, bringing my family, bring my mom, bring my kids, whatever. Like, we just pulled into the parking lot.
The customer viewpoint.
Yeah. How does this feel? How do we want it to feel? Walk in, like, how's the greeting? Like, how does that, like, what's that experience like? And through that, co-design, what does success look like? What do we want that to look like? And you could do that with any subset of the restaurant. I mean, we're using restaurants as an analogy here, but similarly,
any firm.
when I was in the brewing industry, just walk into the cellar with the cellarman and say, hey, how do we want this? How does this feel right now? Like, how does this process feel? Like, does it feel, like overly cumbersome and kludgy? Like, are we hitting the quality that we want? Like, let's co-design what success looks like. And I find that tool, I mean, we talk about it in the accountability loop,
right?
Defining success visually and viscerally.
Right.
But I find that when you can help them create a vision around what great looks like, and that vision co-aligns with their own personal goals, it's the most powerful.
Yeah, it's very motivating.
Motivating and clarifying.
Right. Right.
tool that you can use.
And then the next actions just flow naturally for them, which sounds very different from showing up with a checklist.
Right. And now you get to put on your coach hat
Mm.
and help them, design the tactics that get to that state.
Okay, so I'm at M2. I help my subordinate manager say, look, this checklist has got 27 things on it, but really, what are the most important three right now, given where we
Yeah.
are in the
You get
holiday
us to the
cycle?
root.
And
Right.
yeah, just close your eyes and feel the space. Just look around as if you're a customer. What's really important right now? And let's just focus on that. And since all things aren't equally important, there's always going to be some stuff that's more important right now than other things right now. And when you do focus on just the two or three most important things, you're instantly going to feel the difference. Customers are going to feel the difference. The staff will feel the difference. And you'll feel energized by the fact that you just made a big difference by focusing on the critical few. And so both knowing how to direct a manager in that way and then teaching them how to notice that sounds like a meta skill. It sounds amazing.
Yeah. And then you couple that with, like the delegation ladder, the David Marquet model,
Yes.
to elevate both their awareness.
Right. Yeah.
And
Make sure they're technically proficient and they understand the context in which they're operating. So
Right.
this context sharing, context setting, you've got to know the context yourself, which means you have to be doing what? Looking up and out into the environment to see that context so you can communicate it in and down to those managers who have to be focused on their team day to day. So you're focused monthly and quarterly and yearly. So there's a time span difference. There's qualitative differences. There's skill deficit. There's big skill gaps between these two layers of management, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, one of the things I failed to mention earlier, when I would look for a general manager to promote, I would look for someone who had promoted a large number of managers. It was just, I'd look out, and see like restaurants that were just manager farms. It was like, oh my gosh. And I was one of those managers. Like when I was a general manager, I think at one point I had like 15 or 20 managers who had come from my restaurant.
Right. They'd come up through you, underneath you. You'd grown them up. You taught them the business. Now they've gone out and now they're running their own restaurants.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I would look for other.
You were a talent farm.
I would look for general managers who, another, like my other way of saying it was like, I look for GMs who made the job look easy. Like you'd see these GMs that were like, it's so hard, maybe they had great results. Like they were running a highly profitable, multi-million-dollar EBITDA restaurant, but
with an 80-hour week.
They were doing it. They were doing it with an 80-hour work week. It's like, that is not going to be a successful regional manager.
Right. And it's not sustainable. It's not good for you or the staff. It doesn't scale up. It causes its own problems by creating burnout. It creates other longer term problems. And the only way out of the 80-hour week with quality is to systematize, is to up your skill level, is to push responsibility down, to push, create more autonomy at the lower levels, which requires both skill and knowledge, skill and contextual understanding. Don't just abdicate and say, okay, here, you're responsible for shift scheduling. Good luck. And they don't understand like what that means or how to do it well. Or that's called abdication, not delegation.
Yeah.
So it's harder. It really is.
Yeah.
And would you say the other thing that I've heard said, I've said it myself, I feel that it's true. I want to check with your understanding. Someone's at the M2 level, they're managing managers. They've got these new skill sets they need to develop. I would claim that they need to understand their own network better. They probably need to be networking much more proactively in order to understand what's happening in their industry, in order to understand what's happening in other parts of the organization that they're going to interface with. They're probably going to need to be much better at recruiting. They should probably be on a talent hunt on an ongoing basis, looking for their next whoever it is that they need. And they're probably going to need some dedicated thinking time to strategize, to wrestle with longer term problems that are on their plate.
Yeah, I would say the thinking time is probably the most ubiquitous one of those. Like depending on your organization, you may not necessarily have to worry about those other things, and it may not may not be a ubiquitous thing that's needed across, all managers.
Right. Not all M2
But I would
folks
say,
in all industries are that way.
right. Yeah. Yeah. You may have, you may not need to focus on recruiting at all because you've got a great recruiting pipeline in your company.
Dedicated team somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So,
But the thinking
however,
time.
that idea of, there is a key difference there in, using some time blocking techniques or, whatever your favorite strategy is to ensure that you've got thinking time to really think about your team and think about your players, because you've moved up into a more strategic layer.
Yeah. So I also want to touch on some specific techniques that you and I have both taught and talked about with folks. When we coach them and when we teach them, things like having skip level meetings. If you're the frontline manager, you just meet with your people. But if you are M2, you will need probably quarterly. That's what the manager tools folks suggest, and I like their guidance. You will periodically meet with the folks who are 2 levels below you once a quarter in a structured way, with their manager not present, so that you can get a feel for how things are going for them. You'll come in with a lot of prepared statements for them, and you'll take a lot of questions and you'll answer them on the spot. And anything you can't answer, you'll take away and answer within, say, 48 hours. And the purpose of the skip level really is to give folks a chance to connect with you as a human. So it's not like their only human connection to the business is with their direct boss. They've got at least a little connection with you. And so you can get a feel for them. Like, are they no one making eye contact? No one's joking. Everyone looks really serious. No one has any questions. No one shows any initiative in the meeting. Like, that would terrify me. Right. Or they're very boisterous and disrespectful would also worry me, as opposed to they're cheerful and a little playful and optimistic would be the things I would look for in a skip level meeting. Customer visits would be another, or customer contact.
Probably the most challenging thing about skip levels is that you're going to have you have the desire to jump in and solve problems.
Oh, yes.
And that's the number one way to, completely eradicate and undermine your own manager's ability to do that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
yes.
so,
don't make decisions and don't solve problems that your subordinate manager should be making and doing.
100% put on the coaching hat.
Yeah.
In those. And, what I always aim to do is as if I was a coach for this manager, offer them support, help them clarify what their issue is. And, if I'm helping them work through a problem with their boss, who is, my subordinate, I'm coaching them on how they can have agency in the situation and how they can bring their problem to their supervisor appropriately.
Right. Yeah. Right. So frontline Fred needs to challenge, manager Barney on something, and they're talking to you about it. And it's like, well, you don't say, well, I'll talk to Barney for you.
Yeah.
No.
Do not.
It's like, well, maybe approach him this way. Say something like this. Yeah.
And by the way, I love the manager tools recommendation of once a quarter. But I would go, unless you've got an organization that is just not possible, I would go far further than that, and see those managers on a more regular basis.
Sure. Yeah. So quarterlies for skip level, but you want to be out there, like walking the floor and like watching customer interactions and watching the frontline operate, and using your spider sense, if you will, to try to understand what's up, so that you can support that frontline manager who has responsibility for those operations.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up here. We've covered a lot of ground, and I want to make sure that we can sort of recap it in a coherent way, so folks have some good takeaways. It seems to me like we've established pretty well that when you start managing managers, and I don't just mean like you've got a couple of team leads, right? And like you've got 3 team leads and they've got 3 frontline people, and so now I'm a manager of managers. No, you're still daily, you're still tactical, you're still focused. You're still
even that has elements. That still covers elements of what we're talking about. Like if you bring the mindset we're talking about to that situation, I would put good money on. I would put good money on you become more promotable instantaneously.
Oh, nice, nice. Okay, so basically anybody could be thinking, "Hey, I'm a frontline manager, but I'd like to be promoted. How do I learn the skills for that?" And you'd be following our guidance when you do that, which
Really,
includes,
because yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially, yeah, if you are creating more agency, giving your team more context and creating more autonomy, like that's really the skills that we're talking about that are successful at the M2 level.
yeah,
Those also drive success at the M1 level.
got it.
Do they
Uh,
not?
I I have to think they do. I have to think they do because remember, you want to push down autonomy and expect technical excellence at every level and expect people to keep growing. And you need to be giving them enough context to make intelligent trade-offs in your absence. For instance, um, I still remember. I might have told you this story. The day I finally understood my job as a busboy was my very last day
Right.
because I was asked to brief the next bus person. It was a girl. I think I was 16, and I said, you really only need to do three things. I'm like, why did I not know this? It's like a year ago when I started this job. I said, look, you got to make sure that you're constantly pulling the dirty dishes out of the dining area and keeping the tables clean so your waitresses are happy. You want to continually be feeding dishes to the dishwasher so they're on top of their job. And you're continually putting clean dishes over to where the cooks can get to it so they're not pulling food off the grill and got no place to put it. And if you're keeping those groups happy, you are keeping the flow correct in the restaurant, and the bathrooms are always spick and span. And if you ever see a mess, you clean it up because you're all about cleanliness. And if you can do these things, you're going to succeed. You're going to make everyone around you very happy because you're helping them do their job. And but no one told me that. Nobody ever told me that. I had to say it to myself when I was trying to brief somebody else. And I have to tell you, if someone had told me that, I would have been a much better individual contributor on day one. And maybe they did tell me and I just didn't hear it. Who knows?
Well, I think the difference is at the M1 level, you can get away with not. Like you can make up for lack of autonomy on your team
by just giving them direction.
By being right there, holding their hand,
yes,
doing a certain level of micromanagement, right?
Yes.
What happens is if that is your default leadership style,
you're not growing skill. You're not growing autonomy.
You're well and truly expletive. Insert expletive here. When you go to that next level, you're on board for an 8-hour work week and a whole lot of stress. So,
yeah, 80 hours is unsustainable, no question. Okay, well, I think we've covered a ton of stuff. It'll be all in the show notes, of course. Thank you, Jim Prinzing, my business partner here at Transformative Leadership Lab. We're so thrilled to bring you M2 Managing Managers, our podcast. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks with whatever the heck our next topic is. And until then, I'm Thomas Cox, and this is Jim Prinzing, and we thank you very much for tuning in. Take care.